I quite enjoyed two of the stories in Treehouse of Horror 13. One of them wasn't really that much of a fan of. Treehouse of Horror 13 is the first episode of the 14th season of The Simpsons, and there won't be any spoilers for the ending of each story, but I will be discussing what each story involves, at least the premise of each narrative. So I'll be going into a tiny bit of detail, but I won't spoil any of the endings or any of the resolutions, or, well, apparent resolutions, because we know how Treehouse of Horrors go. But this one started off brilliantly. I won't even give away what happened at the beginning, but Treehouse of Horrors usually have these really creative intros, and this one is no exception, and I absolutely loved it. I thought it played out very well. I wasn't expecting it. Great start to a pretty decent episode. The first proper segment is Send in the Clones, great title, and this involves Homer getting a new hammock, and it turns out that this is a magic hammock that clones the person who's in it. And I have to say, I always like it when they use something that's realistic, because people have hammocks, and honestly, I'm kind of scared of hammocks. Not scared in the phobic sense, but I don't think I've ever been in a hammock, and I just don't trust them. They look unstable. I would definitely fall off. This episode has not made me want to go in a hammock. Homer obviously clones himself repeatedly, and eventually there are quite a lot of clones, and things get a little bit out of hand. Having loads and loads of Homers I thought worked very well. It wasn't as creative or imaginative as it could have been. I feel like they could have done a bit more with it, but also given the time constraint of it only being a third of the episode, give or take, it wasn't too bad, but it's definitely something that could have been a full feature or a full episode, even though the episodes are obviously a lot more realistic ordinarily. But it was a good story. I think they made a decent use of the time with it, and I had good fun with it. I think it's my favourite out of the three in this episode. The second one is the Fright to Creep and Scare Harms, and I do worry about the message in this one, but I can't really say what that is without giving a spoiler warning, so maybe I'll mention that at the end. But this one involves Lisa campaigning for no more guns in Springfield. And that's all very well. She's campaigning because this person has on their grave that they were died from a gunshot wound, and there's a quote from them saying they wish for a world without any guns. And Lisa, being Lisa, decides that she's going to make it her mission to make Springfield gun-free. But that backfires. Pun not intended. I won't say any more than that. Maybe with a spoiler warning I'll discuss what I mean about the potential awkward message, but generally I thought it was a really well developed episode, really surprising. There's one character in it who I think he said yippee yippee, if I'm not mistaken. I just found that character, you'll know who I mean when you see it, to be so unexpected. I'm not sure why they were there exactly in Springfield, but I enjoyed it nevertheless. Definitely, well, it's actually my second favourite, so admittedly, this Treehouse of Horror got worse as they went on. Quite often they'll get better, but for me, the third segment, The Island of Dr. Hibbert, just wasn't that interesting. I think the first time I saw it, it wasn't so bad, but watching it again, I just didn't really care for it. Obviously, a parody of The Island of Dr. Moreau, and the Simpsons are going on vacation to this island of lost souls. And Dr. Hibbert is there, and we learn when we first meet Dr. Hibbert in this that he'd apparently gone mad, and that's why he disappeared, but he went to this island, and then the characters start turning into other things. What I will say is Marge looks amazing. I love how they animated Marge's transformation. I love what she looked like. I thought it worked so well. But the narrative itself just didn't excite me. I didn't care for it. As I said, the first time I watched this, I remember being a little bit more indifferent about it. I guess because it was fresh and exciting and I didn't know what was going to happen next. But after more than once, I feel like it got old really quick. And just for me, it didn't work. There's nothing wrong with it specifically. It's not like the narrative is poorly developed or things don't make sense, although it's Treehouse of Horror, so if that were the case, fair play. But it just doesn't speak to me. Definitely not a favourite of mine. So Yeah, for me, it definitely went from good to pretty decent to not that great. But I always expect that with a Treehouse of Horror. I feel like there's always going to be at least one link based on my personal taste. And the Island of Dr. Hibbert is that one. So, spoiler, I guess I'll discuss now what I meant previously. I've got nothing else to say that's non spoiler. But what I mean about slightly worried about the message is basically Lisa, spoilers from now, Lisa succeeded. Springfield was gun free and, to quote, defenseless. And then these zombies rose from the dead and including Kaiser Wilhelm. Like, what on earth? It made me laugh, but it was very, very unexpected, which I guess is why it worked. But it did kind of go, okay, you're defenseless and now you're under attack and you're all going to die unless you've got a time machine. And I did think, oh dear, they've just gone and said, well, if you ban guns or don't have any guns, you're not going to be able to defend yourself, so it's a bad idea to banish guns. And I don't feel like that's the best message to be giving, because that's not a good message at all. So, slightly concerned about that, but let's just hope nobody with the power to ban guns sees this segment and everything will be fine. Unless, of course, you're a big fan of guns, in which case you might not agree with that. But personally, it struck me as an odd choice for a show that's got as big a reach as The Simpsons. But that aside, Treehouse of Horror 13 was unproblematic, generally interesting. Actually, it got off to an amazing start. I loved the intro. First segment was good, second segment was decent, third segment not so good. So it definitely went downhill from the beginning, but nevertheless, all that being said, I did like it. It's not my favourite Treehouse of Horror, but it certainly had its moments.